Unfortunately, being a martyr is the hottest thing to Gwen.
It truly is.
That is her kink, and he has fulfilled it by dying for her.
Well, that's the thing, and now she'll never get over it.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2022, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton Deschain.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Hello and welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? I am... What?
What'd you say?
Sorry. Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Things got really quiet for a second.
I am one of your hosts, Dalton Deschain.
I'm the other of your hosts, Dylan Roth.
And this is the podcast where we try to revive Universal's failed Dark Universe cinematic universe of monster characters, one film at a time. But today is a little bit different because we are going to be planning a film that you've already listened to and we have not written yet.
Right, because last season, when we first planned to do our big phase capping crossover movie, we imagined that would be the episode that we kind of take a break from writing basically, like abbreviated screenplays for each of our episodes, and we would just kind of riff and establish what the story was going to be.
And that would be the whole thing.
That would be the whole thing, and then we were just going to hang out and watch a movie. That didn't happen. Instead, we decided to write a 75-page scriptment and then cast like a dozen of our friends in roles and then produce a sort of audio drama that was fucking like two and a half hours long.
Yeah, what was going to be one episode turned into three very quickly.
Now, we've polled our online community on our Discord, and the consensus is that this time, what you all wanted was to hear the episode first without our, yammering and plotting.
The actual film, the script that we've written.
Yes, and then later hear the episode that is us figuring out on the air what the story is going to be.
That way you can experience it without spoilers. This is kind of like the Blu-ray featurette, the special features where you've seen the movie with our commentary because we talk in between all the act breaks.
Yeah, we also...
So you've listened to the director's commentary. Now you're watching the behind-the-scenes featurette where we kind of figure out what the movie's going to be.
If you're an Edgar Wright fan and you like to watch the bonus features where it's like Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost on the whiteboard, like figuring out, blocking out the story of the movie... This is that.
Or if you're like me and have watched all the special features on the 2017 Mummy Blu-ray and watched Tom Cruise basically change the entire movie based on his own whims, that's going to be what this is. For you, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, it is August. But for us, it's still mid-June. We just recorded Dracula Lives last week because we are trying to give ourselves as much runway as possible to write this script and get it out to you on time without any delays. So hopefully today we can beat out most of a movie.
Which is going to be interesting because, as we did last time, we're both sitting down at this, having each taken individual notes about what we want out of this movie.
Yeah.
That we have not really, we've barely conferred with each other
about this. We've talked a little bit. We've had a couple text message conversations about things that will come up today. But mostly, this is going to be just us coming in fresh with new ideas that the other person hasn't heard.
It's the biggest blank spot on our sort of slate for this saga.
Yeah.
Because you and I have off the air had a lot of conversations about the end point of this, about things we want to do in phase 3, which for the purposes of our conversation, we're just going to be able to speak out loud as we go. And then you're going to have the job of going through and bleeping stuff out later that we don't want people to know about what's coming in. If you need to, right? You were describing our dilemma for this project as the Age of Ultron problem.
Yes.
Can you explain to our listeners what that means?
Well, for me, what it means is how do you create a compelling middle chapter in this type of ongoing narrative? The first crossover event, Dark Legion House of Dracula, I think it was clear what we needed to do. Just like the first Avengers movie, you have to take all these disparate characters that you set up and put them on a team together. And that movie kind of has to be a, coming together movie. How did they work together? Different personalities, uniting against a common foe. And its novelty comes in that sort of originality, seeing all these characters that you've seen in separate movies, teaming up for the first time. And that's why you go see that movie, right? And I think we did that. And we had Dracula, of course, as our villain. So it felt very big and important. Then for our phase 3 ending, we know what that is because it's the ending of sort of this whole saga we've been building. We've been sort of, whether you realize it or not, dropping little details building up to what our grand finale is going to be. And that is where you really have to end things, end a lot of character arcs. Even if we keep, I'm not going to say we're going to never touch those characters again because we don't know that for sure.
But like with Endgame, our goal was for that to be an ending.
Yes.
Where if you want to, you could call it a day.
And most people did.
Now, I have some thoughts about how to avoid that particular problem in our story, but that's a next year problem.
But the middle entry, what do you need to accomplish with that? It's a little more amorphous. Like, how do you make something that is not just completely skippable, that feels important, that doesn't repeat what you did last time, but also doesn't jump the gun and wrap up a lot of stuff that you're saving?
Yeah. We need to raise the stakes for all of our characters. We need to push them into a new direction to set up, as they did in Marvel, another phase worth of stories. We have to establish a new status quo that is not so close to our finale that there's no room to tell stories in it, but is different enough that it allows us to freshen things up in the next season. And it's like doing the first half of the second act of our story.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. We have done a couple of things throughout this season to really to give ourselves a framework of what to use.
Well, and I was going to say that, like, to our credit, I think one thing we've been really good at this season is introducing new threads that still need to be finished, And so we have multiple villains out there that have not been touched in a while. We have tons of cliffhanger endings. We have a few new characters. So, like, we've given ourselves a lot of toys to play with.
Yes. And one of the things that I did, I know that you have an idea for the plot of the movie that you've come up with that for a little bit.
Sure.
What I don't have is an idea of, like, what the plot of the movie is. What I've done is catalog all of the dangling threads that we have created for ourselves throughout phase 2.
Yeah.
And sorted them by how urgent they are to address in this film.
Sure.
So here's our must-haves, in my opinion.
Okay.
Obviously, we have to have Jenny and Carol's wedding.
Right. I mean, we've been talking about that this whole time.
If this movie, like, we just meet together, thanks everybody for having come. We had a great time with the wedding last week, didn't we? No, the wedding has to be in the movie, the first act of the.
Yeah, I think you and I have agreed that the first act is
we don't have to have
the wedding.
The band broke up at the end of the first movie, but this has created a perfect opportunity for everybody to be in the same place at the same time without having to already establish a crisis.
Which is such a relief
it's
that
so
we
nice.
don't have to go through all the work of, like, justifying every person. Why are they coming back? Like, where?
And it's also a venue for something to happen, because if you're going to have a big comic book wedding, somebody has to crash it. Something has to go wrong.
And one of the things that you and I have talked about is who crashes that wedding.
Right.
And I think we'll get to that in a moment. We'll get to that in a moment.
Okay, number 2. Imhotep has replaced Nick Morton.
Yeah, this is the big one.
And he's coming to the wedding, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what his plan is or what he wants at the end of The Mummy Returns.
Yeah.
But I understand that you do have an idea at this point, and so we'll get to that.
I have a vague idea. But yeah, we left the main character sort of our entire franchise buried underground in Sudan. And we have to figure that out.
But we also established in the post-credit stinger of the Black Lagoon that, at least spiritually, Nick is also in the Black Lagoon, the way station between life and death with the ferryman, Gillman creature.
Yep.
That is presided over by one of our new characters, Hunter.
Yes.
So that seems like they've got to be a part of the story as well. And then the other thing, which is I consider it a must-have, but it's not like a certain, like a plot important thing. I think developing the Gwen and Victor dynamic is something that we've kind of teased as well.
Many ideas for this.
As
I'm
do
sure
I.
we both do. Yeah.
I have an end point that I'm interested in, but we'll get there.
Okay.
Here are our maybes. Gwen sent samples of the werewolf control serum from Werewolves of London to Halsey at the end of that movie. We didn't talk about it in Phantom because it was just completely out of scope.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's something that's going to be dealt with at all here, if maybe it's a plot device that we would use, because it is a connecting line between two of our characters.
I have no plans for it in the ideas I've had, but I can also see a couple ways that it could be. This seems like a helpful plot tool.
Yeah.
Where, like,
something that we inherit from a
like,
previous movie, but it's not going to be an issue here.
Well, it's the kind of thing where certain corners that we may write ourselves into, we can pull this as like a parachute, like especially with our werewolves, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, we need the werewolves to become werewolves. Last time we had the power of Osiris brought to the moon. This time maybe we can use that. The Brixton Bloodhounds, they would not be invited to the wedding. But,
I actually do have ideas for them for this movie, though.
Well, because if the gang, I have one thought about this, is if the gang does go on a globetrotting adventure, that would be a group of people who could give them shelter, who could give them aid. If they're like on the run from Imhotep would have no knowledge of them. That would be a safe harbor.
By the way, if you're listening to this and want to play a drinking game, take a drink every time I say, I have an idea for that, because I was listening back to our first planning episode and I was getting so annoyed with myself. Where like, I wasn't giving you any space. Anytime you come up with something, and we could do, I'd be like, I have an idea for that. I have an idea for that. I was like, shut the fuck up, Dalton.
Okay, well, I do want to hear all those ideas.
I'm just saying out there, punch me in the face next time you see me for every time I say that inappropriately during this episode.
Do we want Hunter to actually join the team, or will they be in more of a supporting role?
Good question.
Claudia's revenge. She seems like the most obvious candidate to crash Jenny and Carol's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a really fun idea about what has changed with her since we last saw her. And again, I have an idea for that. We'll save it later. Do we want to do anything new with Victor and Cassie's relationship and romance? Or is that something where they're just going to kind of be there at the wedding, establish they're a thing, have characters play off of it, and then sideline her until their next film? Because there's so many characters.
Yeah.
Also, should Adelaide Van Helsing play some kind of role in this story? Her uncle was murdered in the prologue of the first film.
Yep.
I think there's an angle where she could become a pawn of Imhotep, and I think there's an angle where she could be an ally to the team.
Or a sort of competitor where she's just sort of on the same mission, but kind of screwing everything up in the process because, as we've seen, she is a bit more bloodthirsty than our Dark Legion.
I think that she adds an ingredient to our stories, which we don't usually have. We have the Dark Legion, who wants to save lives and fight monsters, but who are also half or more than half monsters themselves.
Yeah.
We have Prodigium, which wants to maintain the status quo. We have, the forces of darkness who want to, who have their own selfish agendas. But then there's Adelaide, who I think might be interesting as somebody who just wants to kill all monsters.
Yeah.
So that's something to play with. Things that are probably not in scope. The Mummy Returns revealed that Evelyn O'Connell was alive or reincarnated.
Oh no, I have lots of plans.
You want to use her in this? Okay, well then cool.
We have Imhotep out there.
I know, but I thought this might have to wait until The Mummy 3.
Well, so here was my thought. Before I go, I'm not going to get all into my plot details, but going back to our Age of Ultron discussion, one thing I realized that we don't have, that the Marvel Universe has, is a bottomless roster of characters to introduce, right?
Yeah.
Like, the Marvel Universe, as we have absolutely seen in phases 4 and 5, can pick out any obscure character and be like, hey, they're in the universe now, and add them to the team.
But we're kind of running out of classic Universal monsters.
We have exhausted the Universal monsters, basically, and we haven't really made many that would make good additions to the team. My Creature is sort of a neutral character.
Right.
Our Phantom is sort of a villain now. So we haven't added to our Dark Legion, and on the one hand, that might be good for a podcast medium, because too many characters without faces to attach to them can get very confusing, and we already have so many characters. But I do think that is something that can help a second movie, is that sort of, instead of just seeing the same people fighting evil again, like having like new characters in the mix and new dynamics to play off of can be very fun. And so I don't have many people to add to the Dark Legion, but given that this is an Imhotep story, I was like, Evelyn is really kind of the best candidate for that. Mix in someone from the original Mummy trilogy now with our Dark Legion. That adds a fun factor.
And that would be exciting for, the casual audience as well.
Right.
Okay, so we'll promote her from probably nuts to probably
unless you nix it, but I have big ideas.
No, please, because as the person who is theoretically writing the third Mummy movie, I was like shaking in my boots with the idea of what the fuck am I going to do with Evelyn O'Connell? Because I have no idea, and you didn't have an idea at the time either. So we can get to that. Elsa Falk, the sort of Bride of Frankenstein, another person out for revenge. I kind of imagine that she would get in the mix if we're kind of going to do an Injustice gang type thing. But other than that, she doesn't have enough of a connection to our mythology.
The Darker Legion.
Yes, yes.
The Dark Legion versus the Darker Legion.
Dracula is still human, and he's seen through the door. Theoretically, the end is coming. I don't even personally know if now is the time to pull the trigger on that. We just did Dracula Lives, and that felt like it was setting up stuff for our next Dark Legion movie.
Until Dracula Lives, I was kind of thinking, well, we have to get Dracula involved somehow because he's Dracula, and this is our Universal Monsters crossover. Like, we need him in there. But given where you left him, I'm kind of now like, yeah, I think that's like, it's too big of a cliffhanger to just wedge into a 10-minute introduction. Like, oh, and then this happened, and now he's with us, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think we need to give a lot more time to that. And plus, I think that then gives us something for our big phase 3 ending where it's like, oh, Dracula and the Dark Legion together again after this sort of movie gap.
So I don't think there's room for Dracula, which is a shame because so many of you are listening now because Gita Jackson was the voice of Dracula in the first Dark Legion.
We will get Gita back, I swear.
And similarly, like characters who were introduced in Dracula Lives, like Pazuzu, Victoire, the Master, they're out. They're out of scope.
Hey, if we can fit them in, great. But I don't have plans for them.
Okay, so that was my kind of organization of our various threats. You think did I drop anything there?
I think that's mostly it. Anything else we'll think of as it happens.
Sure. So the big one, I guess, is Imhotep's going to drive our plot. He's the big villain. What does he want? What's his plan?
So I'm kind of feeling the opposite of the last time we did one of these. The last time we did one of these, I think you and I were in the same boat where we were like, we both came in with so many ideas for what we wanted our characters to go through and like the emotional arcs and where we wanted them to end up, but we had no plot details. And in fact, most of the plot we figured out off air after we recorded this type of episode. That's where all the stuff about Osiris and the god of death and like all those things came in after we stopped recording because we just kind of figured out the arcs. This time, I do have some specific character moments that I want to hit that I'm sure we'll get into, but I actually feel like I have a general arc for the whole film that's all negotiable, right? Like, because we're going to figure this out together.
But like I have a lot of, like I have B-plot ideas, I have a lot of little things, but like the big thing that I'm missing that I don't have is like, okay, what is the threat around which the story will happen? And I think in order for the rest of my ideas to come together, I think I need the spine of the story that you're holding on to.
I think now the spine that I have as far as Imhotep goes is, and this, you know, maybe this is something we can work on because it does feel a little kind of simple, just supervillain plot. But I guess so is Dracula, right? With Dracula, we just gave him like, he wants to become the god of death so he can't die. The end. Now everything else happens around that.
Right.
And we have so much going on that like we can keep that kind of simple, that motivation
It's more
kind of
important
simple.
that the characters be interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting characters and simple plot is way more entertaining than complicated plot and boring characters.
So,
especially in a medium like this where we can't just show you spectacular visual effects.
Right. So Imhotep in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, 1999 and 2001, wanted Anaxunamun back, his love, but he was also trying to like conquer Egypt and the world, right? Mm-hmm. And I think he has come back. The Anaxunamun stuff was wrapped up in those earlier movies. He's not trying to find his lost love anymore, but he was in the underworld for 60 years, I think, you know, of our time. We don't know what the underworld time is like, but like we see him at the end of the original Mummy Returns, get sucked into the underworld. He comes back in our Mummy Returns. And I think he sees that as an opportunity where what he wants now is to open up the door between the underworld and our world. He, I don't think, knows, not for the same like Death's Door reason stuff, but he wants to command his underworld army, like just a bunch of demons and stuff. And so he comes to Carol and Jenny's wedding as Nick, trying to get closer to Prodigium. Because he needs to find a new entrance now that the Golden Pyramid is buried. He needs to find a new entrance to the underworld to bring through all these demons and wreak, his vengeance on the earth. He tries to get close to Indrid Cold, but in the scuffle that we will talk about here soon, I'm sure, with I think Claudia is we've kind of decided interrupts the wedding, and instead he takes Jenny because she is the most closely linked to Prodigium out of everyone we have left.
Okay, hang on.
Yes.
Does this mean that Jenny invites Indrid to the wedding?
I just like the idea of Indrid. Maybe she didn't, and he's there anyway.
Because I can't imagine inviting Indrid Cold. I know they were former coworkers. Sometimes people invite their boss to their wedding as a courtesy and in the hopes of a nice gift. They no longer work together.
I can't imagine
tried
him
to
not
gas her to
being there,
death
though.
the last time that they encountered each other.
Okay, so we'll figure that out. Whether or not
he
Indrid
wants
is
to
there.
get close to Prodigium. He ends up.
Basically, he's looking for the Black Lagoon.
Okay.
Is the thing, because the Black Lagoon is, right, we've talked about the veil between life and death, and we've had this tunnel that leads basically straight to hell in the Black Lagoon. We've also established that when the Black Lagoon is in a certain place, there is this like sort of egg sac that lives in our world that sort of is the barrier that keeps the creature and his dimension from crossing over into our world. We saw that in the Creature from the Black Lagoon movie.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to infiltrate the Black Lagoon, bring his underworld army through the tunnel, destroy that egg sac so then he can bring that army to the Earth. And the way he's going to do that is he is going to go to the Black Lagoon while his hand, Claudia, goes to the surface and destroys the egg sac. So he needs sort of a multi-prong approach. This will lead us to a big climax in which some of our Dark Legion is in the Black Lagoon facing off with Imhotep, while the rest are on the surface trying to protect this egg sac from Claudia and her people, whoever that ends up being. And of course, I think that egg sac does end up getting broken. The underworld army comes to the surface and our Dark Legion is sort of split between realms trying to stop it. And that's the backbone. I have a lot of other plot details sort of in the middle there, but that's my general backbone.
All right, cool. No, I like it. I like that it is something that feels like it. Having the Black Lagoon be sort of the tissue that holds together makes sense. It is a very useful device. And also, Hunter is the only of our new characters who is tied to a place.
Yes.
Where the story has to come to Hunter rather than vice versa.
It's also sort of a nice, because this is sort of our second movie, we've been obviously, I don't think it's any surprise, teasing this Death's Door thing. The Black Lagoon is a nice midpoint where our characters don't have to cross through the door yet.
It's a literal vestibule between our two phases, our two extremes of our story, the living and the dead. So that's great. It's also a cool setting for part of a confrontation to be in.
And it's an escalation of how we saw it in the Black Lagoon movie. It's such a quiet place between like usually just a couple characters until the climax, but then to have like a war being brought there is, you know, the big action upgrade to this kind of setting.
And the idea of there being sort of a fight in this place where gravity is inconsistent and where our point of view is unreliable in terms of which side of this reflection are we looking at. I think that's a very cool movie idea for a third act set piece. And in the meantime, we have a way to cut into something that's a little bit easier to comprehend when we go to the surface and we see them fighting around the egg sac or whatever. I like that it also allows us to separate classic traditional physical altercation above with what might be more of a metaphysical altercation below. Yeah. That's exciting. Everyone wants to do the fucking Return of the Jedi thing where you have your totally different fronts being fought.
Exactly.
So that's really cool.
So some ideas I have for how to split the party. I think at the end, our team in the underworld, or not the underworld, in the Black Lagoon is Nick Morton, because we got to get Nick versus Imhotep. But he's not there the whole time. We do have to get him out of the Black Lagoon, and I can get to that in a second. But we got Nick, we have Frankenstein, we have Victor, because he lives in that space between life and death as someone who is sort of constantly dying but unable to die. He is one of the people who can go to the Black Lagoon. Nick can go because he will have Set with him. I'll get to that in a second. So he can pass freely through. And the other person with them is Evelyn O'Connell, because she is now sort of also immortal after her reviving in The Mummy Returns, 2001, I think is when she dies and comes back to life.
Yes.
And so she can also pass through there. On the surface, we have Carol and Jenny. We have our Wolfmen, Gwen and Larry. We have Hunter. And we also have the Brixton Bloodhounds.
Okay.
They call them in for reinforcements, knowing that shit's about to go down and they need an army on the surface. That way, when the armies of the underworld come up, we don't have just like 4 people, 3 of whom are human. Oh, also Jack will be there. We can actually have like, all these underworld demons versus like fucking 10 werewolves or something, you know, something that's going to be a little bit more visually chaotic and appealing and, you know.
Cool. And then we get to the Mall Wolf out, which once again, I failed to do in my Brixton Bloodhounds movie.
And, you know, it could even be a thing of like, they're like, we're so, you know, we don't have enough people. What are we going to do? We'll just fight with what we have. And then someone's like, wait, what's tomorrow night? Oh, it's a full...
It's
Someone
Tumble Tuesday. No.
Yeah, it's a full moon. Call the Bricks and Bloodhounds. We need them on a flight now.
Right now,
wherever we're going.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh man, I have so many ideas.
Okay, so
get me on track.
Let's
get me on
take
track.
it. All right, let's take it back to the beginning. Now, here's the big angle that I want to throw in here as an interesting idea for Claudia.
Okay.
That I thought of late in the writing of that movie as the next step for that character. So Claudia is crushed in the explosion of the Majestic Theater at the end of the Phantom of the Opera.
Yes.
Chandelier lands on her. The whole place explodes. She's horribly burned, and everyone is kind of shocked that she survived. She didn't all the way survive.
Okay.
Like Henry Jekyll, she died briefly and came back to life.
Okay.
And when she came back, she brought a friend.
Okay.
And what she has in common with this friend, what draws the friend, is a fucking hatred of Carol Lemley. That's right. Fucking Eddie Hyde would now be inside, now be sharing Claudia Lawrence's body. But because they're more well aligned in terms of what their goals are, like when Hyde originally came to Jekyll, it was to corrupt. It was like for the demonic joy of corrupting this like righteous soul.
Yeah.
In this case, I'm looking for a friend.
Yeah.
The fucking demonicmatch.com has determined that we have similar values.
Mm-hmm.
Let's work together. So now, not only does that escalate the physical threat of Claudia, because now she's stronger and like unkillable, but it means that she's like, because they're not going to use the serum. They are one person.
Yeah.
They are like a much bigger threat than really either of them were before.
We have Dr. Phantom and Mr. Hyde.
Basically. Yeah. I actually imagined that if there was going to be a movie, just be called Phantom X Hyde.
Sure.
So that is something that I think that we wouldn't reveal right away. I think that she would crash the wedding and she would be more formidable than we've seen her before. And what my thought is that nobody can figure out what's up with her except for Imhotep as Nick. Like, I imagine that she crashes the wedding. Mm-hmm. There's a fight. They stop her and they lock her up somewhere. And Nick goes to see her. And he can sense that she's got a demon in her. And it's basically like, we have a use for each other. Nobody knows that Nick is Imhotep right now. Mm-hmm. He sets her loose to go and run all these various errands. She escapes. I think that the audience will know that Nick is an imposter for a long time, but that we wait until at least the end of the first act for the rest of the gang to figure it out. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we'll also be cutting back and forth between like sort of our B plot here is Nick in the Black Lagoon trying to escape. Or maybe we don't even start that until the end of the first act. But so my thinking was that that's how she gets entangled into Imhotep's plot. It's this, they meet there at the wedding. The wedding is where all this stuff gets kicked off. And that she is the one doing the plot that the Dark Legion thinks that they need to foil. That for a while, they think the villain of the movie is her. We, the audience, know better. But that's what's giving them something to do while Imhotep gets all of his sort of dominoes set up. Mm-hmm. And then the sort of midpoint of the movie, or maybe it's the end of Act 1, but the sort of midpoint of the movie is when they realize they've been duped, everything goes to shit, and then they need to come up with a new plan, they need to split the party, they need to figure out how they're going to defeat these two interrelated threats, one of which seems so far out of their league, especially without Nick, who had been their leader during the Dracula thing. Yeah. So that was my imagining there.
Yeah, that we're thinking along similar lines. I didn't have the Hyde idea, of course. One thing, because, I mean, you probably know now because you've heard the episode, but we do have a title for this one, which is The Dark Legion, The Mummy's Hand, which in this case means Claudia is sort of the mummy's hand.
It's, in the Mara Jade sense.
The one sort of visual idea I had is, because now she's burned, right? She's burned in the opposite of the mask. That I thought what we would do instead of Hyde coming back was that the mummy would grant her powers. And one way we could visually show that is if the burned part of her face was covered in bandages.
Oh, that's
so
neat.
It was sort of the inverse of the mask with mummy bandages, which maybe we can still do.
Most people do it. At some point, maybe
physically.
He heals her just so we can have that image and sell that action figure. But
exactly, yeah, that's a great action figure. So my thought coming out of the wedding, because yes, I think Nick, Emotep, as soon as Claudia crashes it, is like, oh, here's a friend, and is sort of like plotting like, oh, good, someone's causing chaos, so now I can get what I want. And I had a couple ideas for how this goes down. One is that they kind of defeat Claudia here, and Nick is like, don't worry, me and Jenny will take her. We'll take her to Prodigium. We'll make sure she's locked away somewhere safe. Nick knowing that like, he's not going to Prodigium, or well, he is, but he is going to.
But he's going under false pretenses.
Yes.
He's looking for something to get there.
He's basically kidnapping Jenny and taking Claudia with them. The problem with that is if we defeat Claudia and put her in custody in any ways, then the rest of our characters don't have anything to do because they think the threat is gone and we need to keep other people doing something.
Well, that's where there's the opportunity for, at that point, for Nick and Jenny to get to Prodigium, and then for there to be kind of a clash of information. We get to see Emotep start to enact his plans, set Claudia loose. Jenny will know what's up, but maybe she's isolated from the rest of the team. And so they all think they're now going to rescue her and Nick. So they know that everyone's in danger. They're going after Claudia, but they're completely unaware that Emotep is on the loose. Now, that potentially necessitates Jenny being in a fucking box for a bunch of the movie, which I don't know if we want to do.
So here was my parallel thinking to that is that, so we get Nick and Jenny off together, maybe with Claudia, maybe not. But in any case, that's when Evelyn enters.
Okay.
Evelyn enters trying to kill Nick. And if Nick has already revealed himself to Jenny, then Jenny is like, thank you for saving me. Otherwise, she's like, why are you trying to kill him? Because Evelyn's like, that's not Nick Morton, whoever that is. That's not your friend. That is Emotep. Evelyn is the only person who knows what's going on.
And that's good also because it seems the most natural sort of torch passing thing that we can do here is Evelyn to Jenny.
I also like the idea of, I had this dialogue idea today. I don't know if this will make the final cut, but Evelyn shows up and does a bunch of like sick fighting moves, fights off Emotep, and Jenny's just like in awe of Rachel Weisz kicking ass. And at the end, Evelyn turns to Jenny and goes, "Are you alone?" And Jenny says, "We could use a third." That's
a lot of growth from her from the last movie.
That's true. I was like, this will be better if it was Carol. If it was Carol, it would work so much better. And then,
Jenny's like, what? Like, we'll talk. But no, I mean, it's a good bit. I mean, we've been like, are you alone? I'm married. I just got married.
Yeah, I love the idea
she's thinking about it for a second.
Either Jenny or Carol kind of having a crush on Evelyn.
It's funnier if it's Jenny, but it does mean that it has to be quieter if it's Jenny because she doesn't quip and she doesn't flirt.
She goes, we can have a third, and Evelyn goes, what? And she goes, yes, it's just me. Yeah. Just a throwaway line.
It would be funny if it's like how many people who love The Mummy realized that they liked girls because of Evelyn O'Connell. Like, it's one of those movies considered to be like one of those like bisexual treasures or wherever. Yeah. Whatever you're into, you're gonna figure it out from that movie. Mm-hmm. And for Jenny to be like, that would have saved a lot of time, actually, if I'd met this person earlier in my life.
So that's how we introduce Evelyn, and that's how they find out that our Nick Morton isn't here, which will send some of them on a quest to try to rescue Nick Morton, try to find the Black Lagoon. I like the idea of cutting to Hunter for the first time in Egypt. Or Sudan, I guess, because that's where the Black Lagoon is, right? Because it has to be where Nick Morton is.
It's come to Nick because he's imperiled there?
I think because of his connection to Set or something, like the Black Lagoon has been drawn to him and it won't leave until he either dies or gets out. And so Hunter has been there for months. Mm-hmm. And like, we just see her in a market in Sudan. She knows the people there. I'm going to start saying they, because I think also
probably, I think by this point, they them at this.
Another dialogue idea I have that I do really want to fit in is once Nick is on the surface and is sort of with Hunter for the first time, and he's talking to the Dark Legion and he's talking about Hunter and he needs to refer to them by a pronoun for the first time. It's like, well, we got to get, and then he turns to Hunter and goes, them? And Hunter just kind of gives a patient nod and he turns back with the biggest grin on his face, like, I got it.
Yes, a boomer guessed pronouns correctly.
Yes, wholesome ally Nick Morton being like, yeah, oh, I got it.
Great,
okay, perfect. Yes, awesome. so Hunter's there, like everyone knows them, the people of the market, and like they're bored. They're like, why won't this egg sack fill? Why can't I go somewhere else? It's hot, I'm lonely, like what's going on,
And this would also be one of their first like assignments, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like they were all excited, like, okay, it's gonna be my globe-trotting journey. Oops, I'm in this hot fucking desert for a really long time.
Although I did have the idea of saying that, sort of retconning Black Lagoon to have taken place a few years ago and casting an older actor to play Hunter. Because there's nothing time specific about the Black Lagoon. That could have taken place before, and we get like a teenage actor and age up Hunter a little bit.
Okay.
Although I also really like the idea of Carol and Jenny sort of becoming like, and maybe even Jack sort of becoming like a surrogate family to them.
I want to play with surrogate family a lot in this one. I have a couple ideas about that.
I like the idea of like Carol and Jenny meeting Hunter and being like, wait, you're by yourself? You're a kid and you're doing this by yourself all over the world? Like, and
right.
sort of like,
and we've already established that they love to leap to the next relationship checkpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So, they got married about a year after they met, and now they're going to have a teenage child.
But like, Hunter can't go with them. Like, no matter what, Hunter does need to be by themselves and traveling around. But there can be some sort of like, I also like Jack being kind of like Uncle Jack. And I just think Jack and Hunter would get along really well and have like a sort of nice relationship.
Jack is also sidelined in a lot of the first movies. So I think we need more Jack in this one.
Yeah, we got to figure out what to do with Jack in this movie. Anyway, what was I talking about? Hunter. So once Nick gets out, which I think probably happens somewhere in Act 2, the Black Lagoon moves again, and it becomes a race, right? Between Imhotep and Claudia and our Dark Legion to find it first. And obviously, our Dark Legion has Hunter's palm, thing that tells them where to go. But Imhotep maybe has someone at Prodigium now that's like, given him intel or can help him track that.
Either an existing mole or someone who he's bewitched during the visit in the first act.
Yeah, but we've got a ticking clock, right? They're all trying to get to one place, and I think wherever they end up, one way to sort of expand the scope of this from the first Dark Legion is I think when the underworld comes to the surface, it should invade a town. Because so far, most of our adventures have been pretty self-contained, other than Cluj-Napoca, right, where a Romani camp was destroyed. But again, those are like underrepresented people. That's not going to make international news that a Romani camp was destroyed. That's like, no one's going to cover that because they're poor,
we
they're
now
minorities.
Want this to be a moment where people are going to no longer be able to deny that this twisted monster world exists, which is a nice status quo change going into phase 3.
Yeah, we break into the public sphere somehow with these demons attacking a city or a town that would get this kind of coverage. And that's where the Black Lagoon ends up.
I mean, also we're I guess we're kind of ignoring whether or not there would have been international consequences to the giant weird sandstorm in London in 2017.
I guess
we mentioned that it was in the headlines and on the news, but that's nebulous enough that people might not be like, wow, that's so weird. It's the kind of thing that people have conspiracy theories about, but it's not like documented. Like people would look and freeze frame through like cell phone video, be like, that's a face. That fucking sandstorm has a face. So I'm like, fuck off. There's no way. Now it would be, no, the dead are rising from the grave and they like fucking killed my uncle. So this is, people have tweeted it.
Yes.
Okay, so I like that. And I think we should pick a place that maybe is not always like a cool, recognizable city somewhere in the world that is not like one of the ones that they always have big events, in movies happen, like not New York. But
some early thoughts I had was it could be the Snake Town from Switch.
Yeah, but that's
I think we shouldn't do.
We shouldn't. It needs to be, because that would already be a thing, right?
I also still want to use
place where people would. Sorry,
I also still want to use Gurmbush at some point.
Sure,
but probably not for this.
I was thinking, I think it would be cool to do maybe like you and I are both from like not major cities in the United States. I think it might be cool to use one of those B tier towns like fucking Newark or
fucking Minneapolis or something.
Yeah, these never happened in Minneapolis, and that has a bunch of cool, unique stuff like the fucking like sky bridges between buildings you have to take because it's too fucking cold in the winter.
Or do we not? Because the Black Lagoon travels all over the world. Should we not do it in America? It was just in Florida. Then it went to Sudan. Should we do it somewhere in Europe or Tokyo?
We have not yet been. Is at least
we were at Tokyo in The Mummy Returns.
We were at Tokyo in The Mummy Returns. South America is the continent that we have not yet visited.
Yeah,
because we also haven't been to continental Africa. Sudan is Where is it geographically? Is it Middle East or is it North Africa?
I think it's North Africa.
North Africa.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. So we've been everywhere but South America then. South and Central America. So
we can figure that out in the script writing process. But yeah,
we'll
bring
could be
it
a
to
nice
some
tribute
kind
to the setting of the original creature from the Black Lagoon.
Sure. Yeah.
So we could do that. All right. I like that. And I also like the way that sets up things for phase 3 because I have some ideas about where I want characters to end at the end of this. I kind of like the idea of, as a way to uniquify phase 3, for this to be the phase where we kind of have some team ups and guest star angles.
Yeah.
Which I know they kind of also did in phase 3 of the MCU, but I swear this came up independently. I would like for, at the last one, all the characters, for the most part, split away from each other.
Yeah.
I would like at the end of this movie for the team to still officially exist and for some of them to be like, to leave together in different groups.
Sure.
And that those are the groups that we follow into the next one.
I think that's fun.
I think we should reverse engineer that a little bit off of who we want to make the next phase of movies about. But I want to start this here. The first one I thought of is, we're talking about kind of constructed found families things, is that I would like for the next Frankenstein movie to be called and I would like it to follow Victor, Cassie, and Gwen as they are traveling around the world for the purpose of trying to help monsters who are misfit monsters who cannot conform. And you mentioned as a potential thing for phase 3.
Yeah.
And so I think that's potentially an angle.
Why don't we do this? Because we're coming up on 45 minutes. I'm gonna say like the last sort of plot things that I have rattling around my brain, just so we have sort of some general beats laid out. And then why don't we come back from our break and go character by character and talk about who we want them to connect with, what we want their arc to be, where we want to leave them, and also talk about if we want to kill anybody.
Right.
And kind of do like, have our first half of this episode be sort of plot structured, second half be character structured.
I like it. All right, let's keep talking plot then.
I don't have much else. That was sort of the big thing. The last thing I feel like I should maybe touch on is Nick in the Black Lagoon. I think the first time we see Nick, him and the creature are just sitting in the creature's cave, sick of each other's company. Because
it's been months.
Yeah, it's been months. Nick can't leave. They're just sort of both trapped there. They hate each other's company. I think at one point the creature tries to throw him down the tunnel again, but Set saves him. And the reason is because obviously we removed Set from Nick, right? At the end of The Mummy Returns. One of the canopic jars was missing, or two maybe were missing.
Two are missing, but one of them is in the sarcophagus with him, right?
I don't think we made that official, but in any case, I think one or both of them was at least still underground and broke when the cave collapsed. Those little bits of Set have made their way back to Nick. And so
because he's the nearest body?
He's the nearest body.
By a lot.
And because they want to get out, you know, and that's why Nick hasn't died yet, because Set is keeping him alive. But he's not strong enough to turn himself into sand and wriggle through the cracks or anything. He doesn't have powers yet. He just can't die. And so that's why he's in the Black Lagoon and why he can't go down the tunnel, because Set is keeping him alive. Set is keeping him there. So he's just kind of stuck. When he finally leaves, which I don't know how we do that, but I kind of...
He has to have his body to do that, right?
Well, part of me wants to think, like, does Evelyn help them track him down and they dig him up somehow? But I don't know how. I honestly don't know how. We'll figure that part out later.
Right, yeah.
But he gets out, and when they realize what Imhotep wants, Nick realizes we have to go back to the Black Lagoon. And also, Imhotep is the one who sealed Set away, right? We established that in Mummy Returns. That Imhotep was the priest that could control Set. Set wants revenge, and Set has the power to do it. So Nick is like, unfortunately, the only way for us to defeat Imhotep is if I get fucking Set back in my body. So we can kind of reset him from where we left him in Mummy Returns, reset him in a Dark Legion movie. So our like Act 2 climax, before we get to all this like chasing the final thing to the Black Lagoon, is we have to get those canopic jars from Imhotep wherever he left them, so that Nick can be restored to full power and then can enter the Black Lagoon as Imhotep's nemesis for the final fight.
All right. Now we have to establish where they all are. Imhotep has most of them, right?
I think there are 5, and he has either 3 or 4.
Okay. which means we do not necessarily have to then send all of our characters out on separate fetch quests to get it.
No, 'cause we've got so much to cram in that, like, I don't want to make it the Eyes of Osiris again, where I would like it maybe if we could get them all in one go.
Yeah,
or
I
at
think it
least
would
in
be
one
funny
location
actually if they are like, all right, we know that one of them is over here. We have a magical device that helps us to find them. A bunch of them we can't find. We got a strong signal there. We're going to go after it.
Well, Set knows where they are,
We'll
right?
figure it out where
He can detect the other pieces of himself.
Okay, then we'll use. But the joke being like they open up this chest, like, oh, they're all right here. I thought this was going to be, like
it
kind of
has
more
to be
time
some kind of set piece. It has to be an Act 2 climax. Like we can't make it fully anticlimactic. But between the wedding stuff, the Nick reveal, getting him out of the Black Lagoon, whatever else with Claudia, and all, like, it feels like then going on a 3-piece adventure might be too much to fit. But who knows? We'll see how it comes out in the pacing. But yeah, if we could maybe just have it be like sort of the siege on Prodigium in the last Dark Legion, where it's kind of our Act 2 climax, I think that works.
Okay.
And I think that is really all the big plot beats I have. So why don't we take a break? We'll come back. We'll go through our cast of characters. We'll find something for Jack to do.
Right. And we'll figure out what our thematic arc of the movie is, because it should still be about something.
Yeah, we should figure out what it's about.
Yeah.
And will we kill anyone? That's a question to
I feel
answer.
like you must have an idea of who you want to kill already.
I have several. I have an idea for that. And we'll get to it right after this.
Star Trek has never been just one thing. The ideas we associate with Trek are flexible, shifting and changing over time, depending on who is writing it, and even who is watching.
In this sense, then, Star Trek itself is a mirror universe. Or to put it another way, Star Trek's real mirror universe is our universe.
In the Star Trek Mirror Universe podcast, we reflect on Star Trek, the various and often conflicting things it's had to say, and the mirror it holds up to our world.
Star Trek, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder.
The Star Trek Mirror Universe podcast, with special guest star Dylan Roth, available on iTunes, Spotify, and all good podcatchers.
Live long and prosper.
And we'll see you on the flip side.
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, where we are trying to figure out how to make a second blockbuster film starring all of the Universal monsters, except Dracula this time.
That's like the one thing where it's like, God, there's just too much going on. Dracula has to wait.
Yeah, Dracula has to wait, but it's going to be so good when we get him in here. You just gotta be patient. I wanted to say before we went into our character thing, I had told you about this off the air, but I had this idea for the opening of the film, which is Carol in voiceover sort of giving an explanation, like a catch up for the audience of like, and here's where this character is, and then here's where this character is, and then we did this, and then we went to New York, and then blah, blah, blah. And like in Carol's sort of funny way, giving a very quick summary. And then we cut and we see that this is at the wedding, and Carol is telling this to all of her bridesmaids who are just like her normie friends from Portland who are like maybe on the Polterdykes with her, her roller derby team. And one of them is like, wait, so what do you do? And she goes, I help. And that's sort of the end.
That's really good. I can hear that really well in Darcy Carden's voice and in the voice of Steph Sallow, our recurring voice of Carol.
And it's functional, right? It
functional.
catches
Also,
the audience
For some people are going to jump on with this episode.
Yes, yeah.
And so that sounds like a lot of fun.
And we need to like explain at least Claudia's whole deal
and then,
right before Claudia appears.
I don't know about you, but like I think there were plenty of people who are like, fuck, at some point during one of the final two Avengers movies, Infinity War or Endgame, Michael Pena should get to do like a long recap of the entire series. And that didn't happen.
Well,
but now we have our version of that.
We're going to let Carol do it.
Okay, so this brings us to, we're not going to go beat by beat through plot anymore. We did that part. We're going to talk about how we fill this out with the characters, and that will hopefully guide the pace of the movie.
Yes.
What's important, help us to sort our ideas. So let's start at the top. Our characters, I did a little bit of pre-writing in this as well. I like with the last one, what I like to do is to make sort of a chart with each of the main characters. And for each of them, we have three guiding questions. How have they changed since the previous Dark Legion film?
Okay.
As always, what do they want, and where do we want to take them?
Okay.
So with Nick, big literal change here. He's in a box.
Yes.
And Imhotep is walking around in this body, and he has the simplest goal of any character in this movie, which is he would like to not be in a box anymore.
Yes.
So that one's not that hard, but do we have an emotional journey that we want him to go on? Do we want to leave him anywhere different at the end of this movie than he was when he made his big heroic sacrifice at the end of The Mummy Returns?
That's a good question because he is sort of our central character. He is our Robert Downey Jr., as we've said many times. When we last left him, he was a loner, right? He was desperate for a team, but feeling like he couldn't put his friends in danger anymore, feeling like he had gotten his friends killed in the first Dark Legion, feeling like he was ready to be the team leader that Dark Legion made him, but also that he shouldn't do that. And I think now he wants revenge on Imhotep for putting him in the sarcophagus, but also for killing Rick O'Connell, which I assume he'll figure out at some point.
Right. And now threatening and possibly killing the rest of, obviously threatening all of and potentially killing one or two of his other friends.
Yeah.
So he's the only member of the Dark Legion who does not end their Phase 2 solo movie in a better place than they were at the end of the Dark Legion. Well, Dracula's in a much worse place too. But Nick is in a box. Everything sucks for him. But the rest of the gang actually kind of all got happy endings in their Phase 2. So he's got the lowest point to climb up from.
Maybe something about instead of him getting the big heroic moment at the end like he did in Dark Legion, he's learned something about teamwork, and he lets maybe his team deal the finishing blow. Maybe for some reason he can't, and he has to maybe even... He's on the ropes and he is maybe about to get killed by Imhotep. And what he needs to do is trust his team to save him. Instead of feeling like he has to do everything by himself.
Just protect them. Right.
Yeah.
Now he has to understand that he might, whether or not he is the leader of the team, he's part of a team and they're there for him.
Yeah.
Like, the thing, which is kind of a realization of the thing that he most wanted at the end of the last movie, where he's like, oh no, I actually want to be a team. I'm excited for this. And the big reward that he gets at the end of the movie is basically them deciding, yes, we are the Dark Legion and we will remain the Dark Legion.
I actually I think I figured out what I want to happen.
Okay.
And it kind of ties into something with Victor, which we'll get more into, but I had an idea for Victor at the end, because he's going to be down in the Black Lagoon, that we think he's going to sacrifice himself. I don't think we can kill Victor, not after we've just put him with Cassie.
No.
And we have so much more new things to do with him, but I think maybe he has to push Imhotep like down that well back into the underworld, and we think the only way for that to happen is if Victor goes too. But at the end he lives and is able to give the wolf statue to Gwen, which I'll get into more when we talk about Gwen and Victor. But maybe what happens is Nick is going to sacrifice himself. He's ready to do the Iron Man at the end of Avengers, where he's like, I am going to sacrifice myself. The only way to do this is if I die. And he is surprised when his team saves him and takes the bullet for him. And this is sort of his learning moment of like, oh, I was ready to die for this cause, but I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to go by my like army training that like, it's heroic to die in battle or whatever. Like, these people are here for me. And he sort of has a change of heart at the end where he's like, oh, people can be helpful, or people can look out for me, and I can depend on people.
Right, because his journey in the first phase is being, in the original Mummy is going from being selfish to being somewhat selfless, and now he kind of gets to complete that journey to be like, to make it not about him. Because when you're very selfless and you have this sort of messiah complex, that's still being very self-centered.
Yeah.
Right? Even if it's for other people, it's still about you. This is maybe him understanding that he's not the main character of this story, and that he's part of an ensemble.
Yeah.
And I like a potential parallel thing with Victor, because what I would like, when you're talking, what you just kind of inspired an interesting idea with Victor, that the obvious solution at a certain point is for Victor to basically just dive into this thing, the pit, in the Black Lagoon, which somehow we learn is actually probably the only way that Victor can die. And Victor has wanted to die for centuries, but something's changed now. Yeah. He's found acceptance with Cassie and with this team. And for the first time, basically his entire life, he doesn't want to die, and he has to choose to live. And that, I think, is something that can kind of work in tandem with Nick's story.
Well, yeah. So my kind of, to shift gears to Frankenstein a little bit, my thoughts on Victor are that, yeah, as you said, like, when we've known him previously, he has been trying to be by himself, to wait out eternity so that he doesn't hurt anybody else, to atone for his sins. He needs to be alone. He needs to die. But now, I don't think it's so much that I think it is that he has things to live for now. He has Cassie, but also he has people to protect.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of also where his mind is at. Like, I think Cassie's not really going to be in this very much. I think she's at the wedding, but as soon as shit goes down, because she doesn't have powers, she survived, the slasher movie, but like, I think Victor's first thing is like, you go home, I got this. Because he's like, I need to protect her, but also I need to protect Gwen. Even though Gwen can take care of herself,
he feels that
responsibility. And so at the end, when he sacrifices himself, it's because he needs to save the people he cares about. He knows that, like, if I don't stop this now, they're going to be overridden on the surface and Gwen will die. And then past that, it extends to Cassie, And so even though he wants to live, his number one priority is there are people that depend on me now. And he still is in main character mode where he's like, I do need to sacrifice myself. It doesn't matter if I live or die. That's part of me atoning for my sins. But these people that I care about need to live.
And so the idea that he would sacrifice himself, which might have once been a relief, is now kind of a tragedy.
Yeah.
Because he finally has a reason to stick around.
Yeah.
But because of the ability of this team to band together, none of them has to die. Which makes me kind of feel like, although we kind of did this in the previous movie, makes me feel like in order for it to work, none of the main characters can die at the climax. I think that maybe if we want to kill somebody off, it has to be earlier, like we did with the last movie. Because if our final message is the idea that these characters are able to succeed because they depend on one another, you can't have any of them sacrifice themselves to win, or otherwise the message becomes one of them had to sacrifice themselves to win, and we just pick a surprising person. I think in order for this sort of idea to work, they all have to live.
I have 3 ideas about the death thing. First thing, I want to finish something about Victor,
sure,
which is that the wolf carving. Because I do have ideas for this. I introduced this in The Bride of Frankenstein. He goes back to his home to get this for Gwen as a gift. I think during the wedding, Gwen and Victor do have like a big like reunion moment where Gwen is like really happy to see him. He's happy to see her. And he keeps trying to like get her alone. Like, hey, I have something for you. Can we talk in private? But Gwen is one of Jenny's bridesmaids. And she's just got too much going on. She's got to help with the dress. She's got to help with hair. She's got to, like she is like running around. And so there's just never a chance. And then the thing with Claudia happens. They get separated. And I want to keep Gwen and Victor mostly separated for the movie, just so there's never a quiet moment for him to give this gift, and we can put that as the pin at the end of their sort of arc together, where in the denouement of the movie, they can get a quiet moment finally, and he can give this to her, and wrap that up. So death-wise, I am kind of, I think, maybe leaning the same direction as you, which is we killed Jekyll and Hyde in Dark Legion 1, which kind of sets it up. Someone's got to die here, but also we're going to be killing a lot of people. I'm not going to go into too many spoilers.
But yeah, in phase 3 is going to be a bloodbath.
Characters are going to die.
Yeah.
And maybe we can let Dark Legion 2 be a respite and have no... if we can still have stakes without anyone dying, maybe that's the best way to go. Because we don't have, again, we're not adding a bunch of people to the roster. If we lose people, we're losing people.
Yeah, we don't have a deep bench to work with. And I also like a thing that I think is probably a pretty common criticism of the Marvel Universe, but our friend and voice of Victor Frankenstein and recent guest on the show, Dom Griffin, the Armchair Auteur, has said one of the biggest problems with the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that you never have those sort of quiet single-issue comic book stories that allow a status quo to linger.
Yeah.
Every single story is a massive fucking world-shaking event. And except for the first act of any given movie, you never get to kind of marinate in what the world is.
Yeah.
And I think having a chapter where the main thing that changes is these characters who have been separated end up agreeing to stay together.
Yeah.
Allows us to establish, okay, this whole next thing is the status quo of like, no, we're a team, we're a family. And then when we threaten that family down the line, it'll mean more. So I think not killing anybody unless we end up at a juncture where it's like, oh, that person's got to die, which granted has happened in almost every script I've written for this show. There's always been a character I thought was going to make it to the end who had to go.
There is a horror writer in you somewhere.
Yeah, John Bernthal's character was going to be my fucking Han Solo. Dead. I was like, nope, there's just no way he could survive this. He's got to go. He could have been one of the main characters in this fucking franchise. Instead, he's dead, right? And like fucking Joe Taslim's character, Ahul, kind of wanted to have him stick around. I'm like, no, there's just no fucking earthly way that Dracula spares his life. He has to die. So he's gone. So who knows?
To toy with a couple deaths, because I was toying with these in my mind earlier. A lot of people we can't kill because they'd be franchise killers. And we, like you said, we've set up so many people to have new arcs, right?
Yeah.
We can't kill Nick Morton. We can't kill Victor. We can't kill Jack.
We can't kill either Jenny or Carol on their wedding night. We can't do it.
We can't set up a happy lesbian couple and then kill one of them.
And I'll tell you, it has its own problems, but you know who we've barely fucking mentioned in any of these conversations and we're always struggling to come up with things for? Larry.
So here's let me get into what I was thinking. So we do have two Wolfmen.
We have two Wolfmen.
So I was kind of thinking if anyone was going to die, it should be Larry, because he just got his own movie with Werewolves of London, and we've talked about that's mostly a Larry movie.
Yeah.
It ups the stakes for Gwen in phase 3 because Gwen will want revenge. She will maybe regret her actions towards him. It gives her a lot more to play with. It also sets me up to make my sequel to your werewolf movies, make a Native American werewolf in Paris. But so I think if someone was going to die, it should be Larry. I did toy with the idea, and I don't think we should do it, but I want to tease it out because I was really tempted by it for a second, of killing Gwen. The reason being, just imagine the heartbreak of, we do this wolf scene at the beginning. He doesn't have the chance to give her the statue.
And then he never gets to get it.
They keep crossing paths. Finally, we get to the big finale. They're on different planes. Gwen is in the real world. Victor is in the Black Lagoon. He knows he needs to save her. He dives into the pit. We think he's going to sacrifice himself, that he's never going to give the chance to give it to her because he's going to die. And then at the last moment, he does survive, but we cut to the surface and Gwen does get killed in the moment we thought Victor was going to get killed. And then this sets up a new arc for Larry, but also Victor now distraught because he failed at the one thing he said he was going to do, kill the substitute for Caroline that he has built in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's gone. And also, maybe some spoilers, but I think ultimately, if we were going to kill Gwen off,
I think we bleep that.
We can bleep that.
Yeah.
All I can think about is Miss Marvel dying in Spider-Man recently, and how, and I was like, yeah, we have like one female monster in the Dark Legion, and she's Native American, and we're killing her to advance two different men's stories.
Yeah,
like, we would get canceled for that.
I mean,
maybe rightfully.
I think if we have to choose for one thing, I mean, from what we know of our listeners, I think Gwen is by far the more popular character of the two Wolfmen.
Which is why it would make Larry more interesting.
It would make Larry more interesting. It would make Larry more interesting if Gwen died. I actually am very happy with the results of the investment that I put into Larry and Werewolves of London, but I was doing my chart, and every idea I have for Larry is how he relates to Gwen, whereas I have independent ideas for what to do with Gwen. So, I mean, he is the one to kill.
Yeah.
Which also means he's also the one black guy.
That's
got its own thing. That's the problem with, that's the problem with creating this lush, diverse universe. No, that's not really the problem. The problem is that we don't feel like we're allowed to kill any of the characters who happen to be white guys.
We do have plans for another black character way in the future.
We do, way in the future. But,
I don't think we should kill
Gwen. Which I'm sure is a great balm for everyone listening. But it's funny that, like, if we were to try and think of this, with complete colorblindness, Larry is obviously our extra limb at this point. In the same way that Jekyll was in the previous ones. Like, well, this character has kind of served his purpose. We don't have anything for him anymore.
Yeah. And then our next werewolf movie, I think maybe is better served just focusing on one of them, on Gwen,
Yeah.
dealing with the loss of her franchise buddy and maybe getting a new franchise buddy along the way.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. I mean, I think we got to run through the story and see what happens with it. And also, the thing is, if we're going to kill Larry, then we have to make sure he has a strong story in this movie for him to go off on.
Him and Gwen should have something strong together so that it also means more for Gwen when it happens. Like, we need to essentially put the pin in their relationship.
Yeah. My thought had been to keep the two of them more separate in this movie and allow them to interact with new characters and discover new dynamics because they do spend so much time together.
But
in the
actually,
previous
they
movie,
didn't in the previous movie.
I mean in two other films, right?
Sure, yeah.
But the idea, I imagined having Gwen and Victor's thing take precedent here. And then to try, again, this is not a love triangle. That's a weird parent-child thing that goes in both directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for us to find someone else for Larry to vibe off of with that would perhaps uncover some more texture to his character. Because he has not spent much time with Jack. He has not spent much time with Nick. I actually made a chart where I put every recurring character on two different axes and filled in the shades of every pairing of characters, however unlikely, that might have some kind of story potential.
Wow.
Then I left that at home. But
Larry needs to learn non-toxic masculinity from Jack.
I mean, he's matured so much.
Yes.
But that almost does make it feel like he's reached a finish line. Of course, I've thought about, like, okay, is one of these two Wolfmen going to sacrifice themselves for the other? The idea of Gwen dying and then Larry trying to be Gwen, and it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
Right? Because she is so consequential and she is so driven, and feeling as if her dying for him means he now has to fulfill her potential. That's interesting, right? It would just suck to lose Gwen.
That's the thing. I'm so in love with the idea of a scene where Victor wakes up with Cassie by his side and finds out that Gwen died and has like the wolf in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And like just how I love that scene so much, but I don't think it should exist because I don't think we should kill Gwen. But like, oh God, it would give.
I have literally one idea for Larry in the future, and I don't even think it's in phase 3.
Do we kill Larry then?
I think maybe we do kill Larry.
Because here's the thing, and I am going to bleep this.
Yeah. I mean, it also would be funny, not funny, haha funny, but interesting. His big thing in the first movie is that he witnesses Jekyll sacrifice himself in this pointed moment of showing him like what it means to really be like a hero, is that he gives his life for Carol and like is basically looking him in the eyes as it happens. And now he is in a situation like that.
And he dies at Hyde's hand.
That's true, because Claudia would be the one to do it, wouldn't she?
Yeah, that's some nice narrative symmetry.
Okay,
Hyde does end up killing it.
Now we kind of have to do it. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I don't like about it is the optics, and this is a podcast, which means that we kind of get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, and we've done a lot to increase the... like, it's not like our cast is entirely white other than...
No, we've only added like 2 protagonists, Jack and Carol.
Yeah, I mean, like we've got, Hunter is Hispanic. We've got obviously Gwen is Native American. Like we don't have any other black characters right now.
Like again, in these entirely hypothetical movies that could be recast in any direction, we don't have to sweat it too much.
I think
especially having put this conversation out there, I hope people will be patient and understanding that it wasn't like, we got to kill somebody. I guess you'd be the black kid, right?
And I hope that our listeners, we've earned enough goodwill as to white people building a cinematic universe that we have really put a lot of effort into making these diverse.
Yes,
and
we're trying to do it in a way that also does not feel like pandering or like we're trying to score points with people, which I think in that same spirit, we can't not do something because we're afraid it's going to look racist when it's not.
Yeah.
I think that we have to have the confidence in our audience, that the trust in them to realize that we're not making decisions about these characters based solely on what race the actor we have hypothetically cast to play that role.
We have a big whiteboard where we have ranked all the races, favorite to least, and we just go up from the bottom. No, I think Larry now, especially now that we've hit on that Hyde symmetry,
Yeah,
I
it's
think
gotta be
Larry
Larry.
has to die.
And I think that also gets to maybe do the similar kind of emotional thing where, like, we talk about how they don't go to the wedding together, right?
Mm-hmm.
They do get their dance, but that maybe is an opportunity for them to spend a little bit of time together and be like, try to take the gauge of where's their relationship at, and for them to both have the feeling of, you know what, we have plenty of time.
Yeah,
We're young.
I think we tease them getting back together throughout the entire movie. Like the viewer should think that their arc is that we're finally putting them back together.
Yeah, and then he
dies.
dies for her.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that when she really kind of falls for him for real in my thinking, when it really goes from being a guy that she likes and has feelings about, and to really being like, no, I actually do love you, is when he steps up to his dad and says, yes, I would die for these people.
Yeah.
And her being like, no, you can be the hero that Gwen in her own mind is like, that I am.
Unfortunately, being a martyr is the hottest thing to Gwen.
It truly is.
That
like,
is her kink, and he has fulfilled it by dying for her.
Well, that's the thing, and now she'll never get over it.
Yeah.
Because it's the kind of thing where, like, Gwen is the kind of person who would be attracted to the kind of person that she wants to be, right? She's not looking for an aspirational dream of someone who's going to make her dreams come true. She wants to find somebody who has the same dreams as she has and makes those dreams come true for the same reasons, right? She wants somebody who will fight selflessly for a better world, who will put the cause above everything else, and who is just like a fucking great human being.
Yeah.
And Larry was not one of that kind of person. And then she also gets the added thing of getting to feel kind of responsible for his transformation, which is both fulfilling and also is potentially going to cause her some guilt because this very same things that made Larry someone she could love are kind of the things that, at least, again, he's had a journey outside of her, but from her experience, especially being a fairly self-involved person, is going to be, oh, I made him a hero and then he died, right? She's a little bit more mature than that, right? Especially after Werewolves of London, she's much more of an adult. But we have to do it. Larry's got to go. Fuck.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
It's a shame. Sorry, Larry. We love you.
I'll break the news to Julian.
Honestly, Mason Gooding, you've survived so many Scream movies that you shouldn't have survived at this point.
Yeah, Core 4, baby.
It's your time. It's your time to actually,
You're gonna do fine.
Bite it.
Paramount loves you, bro.
So we've covered Victor, we covered Nick, we covered our wolves. Let's quickly touch on my idea with Carol and Jenny was, again, to keep them separated until the climax.
And the whole tension of them trying to make sure they get to enjoy their marriage.
Yeah, I think it's really, them just being concerned for each other, finally reuniting at the end, and then maybe having this connection with Hunter that's like, hey, if you need anything, like, call us.
Well, this is the thing where potentially gives Carol something to do, because especially if we have them separated and we have, like, potentially have Jenny and Evelyn in the lagoon, but Carol up top, is that Carol gets to be the one interacting with Hunter, maybe.
Well, actually, I was going to have Jenny and Carol fighting together.
Okay, at the very end.
Yeah,
All
because there's no way for Jenny or Carol to get to the Black Lagoon. I experimented with some ways we could kind of finagle that, but, like, I think mortals, they should be on the regular.
But if mortals are going to be meeting Hunter, a way to give Carol a role in the story, because right now Jenny's part of the plot and Carol's kind of a hanger-on right now where we currently sit.
Yeah,
is to give them an emotional thing. And maybe we might not be able to play all these things out because there's going to be too many threads.
Yeah.
But maybe there's now, like, something that some in-law says at the wedding reception. I like the idea of Jenny's family being very traditional, and they are acclimatizing to the whole their daughter's married a woman thing, because Jenny wasn't even out to herself until she met Carol, in my thinking, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of came out of nowhere. And then there's the added thing of the fact that there's a weird monster man and invisible man at the wedding. It's like this weird kind of thing. We don't even have time to think about that. We're right now still acclimatizing to gay daughter, right? So they're like, table the 7-foot monster man. I don't even have room for it. What I do want to talk about is, you two got married. Is that like a stepping stone to adopting? And Carol is like, ah. But, like, the idea for her of, like, starting a family feels like too adult an idea for her.
Yeah.
But Jenny is kind of a traditional person, right?
Mhm.
And so maybe Carol, even if she never gets to kind of discuss it with Jenny because they spend so much time apart, is like in this weird place where she's like, oh, wow, I'm married. Like, I'm starting the next part of my life. What does that mean? And then Hunter becomes a way for her to kind of study this idea in herself and decide what she wants in the next phase of her life. Because
And I think we can make that pretty simple in the movie. Like, if we just have like that scene at the wedding with like the parents talking about and Carol being like sort of freaked out by the idea of a kid, and then we have her just kind of imprint on Hunter a little bit during their adventure, and then I think at the end of like, maybe we should talk about having a family. You know, like that's really the 3 points you need for that to be the arc.
That's easy to do.
Yeah,
right?
That's like a really easy arc to weave in that then helps us progress their relationship, connects them to Hunter, and we don't have to give it like 50 minutes of screen time. You know, it's like it can just be these 3 quick scenes, you know, because we're also giving them the entire first act to get married. Like we can't spend the whole movie focusing on them, you know.
All right, so there's Carol. Box checked.
Yeah.
Jack. We really need to find Jack something to do in this movie because
we really do.
He didn't get his own movie in phase 2. We've kind of resolved his emotional crisis from the end of the last movie, but he wasn't in a lot of the last movie. He's the character who we've seen the least of all of our leads throughout this at this point. And so like going into the 13th movie of our saga.
He is kind of easy to forget about, which I know is his worst fear. But yeah, it's the kind of thing because his power is useful in very specific circumstances, but like he's not a monster fighter. And most of these turn into monster fighting movies. We do have to like find a way for there to be more horror in this too, because like right now, like, yes, we have like the set piece at the end, but like we haven't come up with ways for our villains to interact with our heroes along the way in like scary ways, which hopefully we'll figure out in the scripting phase.
Well, the Nick and Jenny thing, I think there's benefit of having, this is where I think we have the benefit of at least having some of the characters be unaware of what's happening with Nick. Because then the terror comes from, my friend isn't acting like my friend anymore. Something is wrong. They're not knowing who to trust or putting their trust in somebody who they've learned to trust, but who isn't acting trustworthy. Mm-hmm. I think that's potentially very psychologically discomforting, right? Yeah. And for the audience, there's all this dramatic irony of them knowing what's up with this guy and they don't. So that I think is potentially the value of drawing that out into the second act for some more of the characters.
The problem is there's so much to do after that.
And then I mean, we had Army of the Dead at some point. Imhotep himself is capable of some gruesome stuff, and now we have a super ruthless, super strong Claudia who could potentially do some really nasty body horror stuff to people.
Yeah,
because now we have somebody who is a different kind of brilliant than Jekyll, right?
Yeah,
but she's clearly methodical. And she's like completely like racked with guilt and grief and anger.
You know, it might be a fun idea.
Yeah.
As an Act 2 set piece. Because Claudia is a tech genius, right?
Yes.
That's what we've established. She commands a prodigium base and rewires it. And it's sort of like the mansion from 13 Ghosts, where it turns into like booby trap mansion.
Okay. Yeah, let's do a tech haunted house.
Yeah, like our heroes have to go in, but like she's got it wired to her every command, and they have to like find her while she's got, you know, doors that can cut off their limbs, and you know, like she's, you know, it's basically tech haunted house.
That's cool.
That might be a cool Act 2 idea for one of our teams in the split. You know,
if that doesn't ramp things up enough, she could set something loose in the base that's been imprisoned there.
Sure. Yeah.
But that means adding another character, another creature, or something which we maybe don't need. But let's see what the situation demands. Because the house itself could be cool enough or scary enough.
Yeah.
Especially if the people who are trapped are two mortals, right? It's just going to be Jenny and Evelyn trying to get out.
Yeah, that would be fun.
And if at that point they don't know what's up with Nick, then there's the added element of someone who's trying to get them killed, who they trust.
Maybe, so Nick, Jenny, and Claudia leave from the wedding. Nick says he's going to, Nick and Jenny say they're going to take him to a prodigium base. But we'd have to figure out why it's abandoned or something. Nick lets Claudia go once they get there without without Jenny knowing. Evelyn has followed them there. We could basically have this all this plot stuff happen at this sort of booby-trapped house. And yeah, it ends up being Evelyn coming in being like, that is not Nick Morton, that is Imhotep. And now they're sort of running from both of them.
Right, because we last saw Evelyn with Cold. Cold has brought her. She's in the base already.
Okay.
She has allied herself with Prodigium since that conversation. We still don't get to know maybe we'll find out later. We still don't know the result of that conversation, like how is Evelyn alive, what's going on. But whatever happened, whatever deal was struck in the post-credits of Mummy Returns is ongoing, right? She's there already. It's a happy coincidence for us that she's there and she happens to be able to recognize that Imhotep is there. And Imhotep is fucking surprised and pissed to see her alive, right? But has to maybe hide it at first. But she identifies him. She gives him away. But maybe that's not one of the first things that happens when they're there, right? Maybe it takes her some time to figure it out. Like, what's with this guy? He's got a weird energy. It's like, well, he used to be a mummy. Is that it? And, we figure out what the order of operations has to be to create the most tension for the characters. And then maybe the point where things turn in our character's favor is when she realizes, that's where I fucking know you. You're Imhotep. And she does something to attack Nick. This freaks out Jenny. They have a misunderstanding. They have to kind of get through this haunted house together somehow with all this trust that's broken and confused. And then we have a calm when that's all over. Nick has escaped with whatever he needs, or rather Imhotep has escaped with whatever he needs from Prodigium. And he and Claudia get away. And that's what leaves Jenny and Evelyn their breath to do their big exposition exchange.
And I think maybe just technically how this works is when they leave to go take Claudia to Prodigium, Jenny's got a list of from back when she worked with Prodigium, of every Prodigium safe house or whatever, in the world. And she's like, well, there's one nearby, but it looks like a small facility. I don't know if they're going to have any holding cells, but let's go try it. It turns out it's just Evelyn's lab. It's wherever Indrid has hired her. And it's literally where Evelyn lives with a security detail of 3 or 4 Prodigium guards. And just by coincidence, this is where they end up. And then those Prodigium guards end up being our cannon fodder for Claudia so that we can see people fall victim to her
by the house. Yes.
So
okay,
basically,
that's good.
They team up with Jenny and Evelyn to try to find Claudia once Claudia is set loose. All the guards die, then it's Evelyn and Jenny, and then like you said, it's where do I know you from? And we figure that out.
Important, pertinent geographical question then. Where is the wedding? Is it in the UK where Jenny's family is from? That's where the money would be.
I was thinking Portland, but we could do the UK because that's where Evelyn would be, right?
Evelyn would
British.
That makes the decision for us because it would have to be, that's what made me think about it, because I think for her to be in the States is too much of a coincidence.
English countryside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, we have implied in Phantom of the Opera that Jenny comes from money. And so maybe they have either the resources or the connections or an actual property where they can have the wedding there that's secluded enough that you can have a 7-foot monster man, in the fucking party or whatever. And it's not going to cause a scene, right? And they also have the money to fly out all of the Carol's roller derby pals.
Yeah.
So there you go. Problem solved. They're in the UK. All right. So then they're going to go to the London lab. Actually, the London lab is where the mummy takes place.
I know.
So something like that.
I think it's just it's literally a country house that they own that Evelyn is using as her base.
Right. But there has to be like an underground labyrinth that can be booby tracked a million ways.
There's got to be some kind of Prodigium-esque stuff. Yeah,
sure. I think but above ground, it could be a little.
It was originally a Prodigium safe house that now Evelyn lives in after meeting Indrid.
Right.
We'll figure out those details.
Are we going to once again go to Prodigium and not have Indrid in the movie? Not a problem with me. I don't see a role for him here.
Again, I thought he would be at the wedding, but maybe not.
I do not think.
Okay.
I don't think we need him, especially now that we have a reason for Nick to get to Prodigium. Nick goes to the wedding knowing that Jenny is his way into Prodigium, but he doesn't have a plan yet.
Jenny,
he doesn't have a plan yet. He stumbles upon the plan when Claudia crashes the wedding, and he's like, "Oh, now I know how I can get there. I don't have to play a long game." Maybe we have him seed an idea of being like, "Hey, I'm trying to get back in touch with Prodigium. Do you know anybody?" She's like, "I'm a little busy right now, Nick. I'm getting married. Can we talk business later?"
Yeah.
And then this opportunity drops in his lap. You don't need Indrid Cold in it.
Yeah, we probably don't. If there's an organic place that he fits in, great. But otherwise, we can leave him out. Jack.
Okay, this is where we started talking about Jack. What the fuck is he gonna? What does he? All right, well, let's go to the chart.
Here's the one idea I have. One thing I was thinking of is actually about Hunter. Hunter is not a warrior, but needs to be present. It is a lot harder to... Hunter is a child, and they should not be fighting armies of the undead.
No.
But this is their domain. They need to protect the Black Lagoon. That's their job. I was wondering if maybe there was some plot way we could work out. Maybe Jack the whole time, maybe someone says early on to Jack is like, well, can't we like all turn invisible like with your blood? And Jack is like, no, I'm not doing that again. Sorry, nobody's taking my blood anymore. That is something that's
the
not
kitchen is closed.
Yeah, exactly. That's not on the table. But then they all meet Hunter and they're like, we're going to have this army coming here. Hunter, we need to get you far away from here. And they're like, no, this is my domain. And Jack is like, well, maybe for Hunter, there's some way we could do a blood transfusion that will turn you invisible just for a couple hours. Again, the thing is like, we don't want to turn Hunter permanently invisible, but like, is there a way we could have Jack be like, I got you, and have them be sort of the invisible twins during this fight and have Hunter running around and like, stabbing people, but like being invisible and being kind of protected and safe. And then sort of having this bond with like Uncle Jack.
I think it's funnier. First of all, I don't know how I feel about setting the precedent that anybody can be made invisible with Jack's blood.
I don't like that either, yeah, so especially temporarily.
I think if we're going to treat being invisible as the kind of advantage that would allow a 12-year-old to win a bunch of fights, then it follows that Jack has that same advantage already, which we should just use, right? I do like pairing the characters together. I like the idea of Jack's job being to protect Hunter, which is something that is possible to do because Hunter will look undefended, but won't be. So Jack will be in charge of that. And there's also the added comedic element of in order for Jack's powers to be useful, Jack has to be naked. And now there's a kid in the room and he's really uncomfortable.
Oh no.
And Hunter has to be like, I can't see you. It's fine. He's like, I don't want to be that kind of uncle. It's like, I think that creates a dilemma that's funny.
Oh god.
That lets him be awkward in a way that
and
suits
makes
the
Jack
character.
a sex offender.
No, because no one, it's fine because he's invisible. Nothing will end up on his cock and balls on this one. He's like, I don't know what tends to happen when I get invisible is somehow all kinds of fluids and powders end up on my junk and you can see everything. It's like, it's not going to happen. You're going to be fine.
So basically Jack ends up as sort of Hunter's babysitter in the final battle and sort of as anything. It's still just so hard. Like if we're going to have like the armies of the underworld storming the thing, is even Jack going to be enough to protect this kid? Jack can't fight
it's
either.
Not going to be just Jack. It's going to be a band of 6 werewolves. And,
yeah, that's true.
And whoever else we have to recruit.
I guess the whole thing is Hunter is guarding the egg sack, right? Hunter has the sack. And so,
guarding a stationary position.
Which means everyone's job is protect Hunter.
Yes.
Everyone, like, no matter what, not only just because it will let the army out, but because it's a child, everyone's job here is protect Hunter. And Jack is sort of the final line of defense.
Exactly what I was about to say. So you have the werewolves tearing shit up, and that's the main thrust, right? That's the first wall. Yeah. Anybody who gets past the werewolves is going to make a beeline for Hunter because they appear to be undefended.
Yeah.
Then Jack takes care of them.
Yeah.
There you go. And that also means, the werewolves can be having their thing. Story-wise, character-wise, in terms of what's important to whom, Gwen and Larry are important to each other. They're having a story. They're having a moment, right? Jack needs somebody to have that moment with. Jenny and Carol, they're fighting back to back, or they're doing whatever they're going to do. Or maybe they're also helping Hunter because they've built a bond, right? But these are our less not defenseless, but, more vulnerable human characters. But Jack can be with them without immediately evaporating the tension from the situation because he's helpful, but he's not 6 werewolves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good.
I think his arc, I think he and Hunter actually have something a little sort of in common, where Hunter is sort of by themselves by choice, right? Because nobody understood them back home. Mm-hmm. And they have made this decision to live a life of solitude. And I think maybe Jack has been on a similar journey where he's been like, no one can see me anyway. I've been in danger. Like, I'm going to be by myself no matter what. And so I think maybe they have something to relate to, but maybe even at the end, Jack is like, hey, can I maybe stay with you? And like, we can travel around together and like, sort of, we can both protect the Black Lagoon. And Hunter's like, no, man, you got to get back out there. Like, sorry, but like, this is my job.
Yeah.
And you actually, I know that you think that nobody will be your friend and that nobody will love you or whatever, but like,
look at all these guys.
yeah, like also like you're a fun guy. Like live your life. And like maybe Hunter is the person to be like, what the fuck, man? Like get back out there, like enjoy yourself. And so this will set up for Jack's next arc, which is like him trying to re-enter the world as an invisible man.
In a movie that I desperately hope you call The Invisible Man Sings, with an exclamation point.
I'm not going to write 2 musicals for Phase 3.
Okay, well, listen, we should talk about that another time.
We'll talk about that another
We
time.
do want to talk about, let's get through the rest of the cast. I think we basically talked about all of our main characters.
Yeah.
We talked about Carol, we talked about Jack, we talked about Gwen, Larry, Victor, Jenny. We haven't talked that much about Gwen, but it feels like we've used Gwen as a connecting thread between all these other characters, that we have her story.
Yeah.
Her story is sort of like, I like the idea that she's also working forward on sort of an arc to become a leader of the team. I kind of imagined that in the absence of Nick, the person who becomes the team leader is now Jenny, but that it will eventually be Gwen's job.
Yeah. I think maybe Gwen's arc here is, in our first Dark Legion, she sort of learned the lesson that with great power comes great responsibility. That these powers aren't just a blessing, they're a curse, right? And they are dangerous. And I think now she's learning that making change in the world requires sacrifice. And at the end of this, she's going to see that Larry has fallen to the cause. Victor almost died for the cause. And she's sort of learning how high the stakes are, that like, yeah, if you're going to dedicate your life to making the world better, you're going to lose people along the way.
And I think that this also feeds into, I know that you just basically pitched what you want your werewolf movie to be.
I pitched a title.
But I want her to decide at the end of this to be like, I need to be spending more time with the people I care about, because they could be gone at any time. Last time we finished our big battle, I told Victor I wanted time to myself, but this kid needs me. And I think basically that she's like, Victor and Cassie, now like the monsters are exposed to the world. Victor's somewhat more vulnerable than he's been in a while, but also he's feeling like maybe he's ready to take more of an active role in, okay, if I'm no longer a secret, then I want to do what this group has done for me, for other weird, like non-conforming monsters. And Gwen is like, that's exactly the kind of thing that I should be doing with my time, and I want to do it with you. And that she basically ends up traveling with Cassie to try and put some of their theory into praxis.
I like this because I think we've figured out thematically what the movie was about. Our first one was everyone ended up going their separate ways and, being sad at the end. I think this is one about all these misfits realizing that they're families, right? And we've sort of built 2 different family units. We have a family unit of Cassie and Victor and Gwen. And we have a family unit of Carol, Jenny, Jack, and Hunter. Who's not included here is Nick, who is the person who I think we do need to put him somewhere with someone, because I think the lesson he needs to learn, I think we need to see Nick at the end seeing these different families develop and being like, good for them, like I'm so glad these people are happy and with people that, love each other. But that's not the life of a soldier, and that's not the life of someone cursed with Set, and he's got to go his own way. And then maybe Jenny and Carol ask him to just like crash with them for a while, or something. Like Nick needs to go somewhere. I don't think we can have Nick walk into the sunset by himself again.
Yeah, I think that you're right, where it's basically like, I think that he has to get, if not 1, then 2 offers, where he thinks he has to go it alone, and they're both like, no, Nick, if you've got nowhere to crash with us. Or do you want to go to France? And then basically him getting to be like, yeah, you know what? I got nothing going on right now. I just spent months in a hole. I think I would like to go, like Carol's basically like, fuck it. Our honeymoon is now our honeymoon. Let's go to Barbados, right? Like
that'd be fun.
And then we can close on a montage of Polaroids from the fucking honeymoon. People, terrified bartenders serving a 7-foot undead monster. And I don't know if we want to go that broad with it, but
I don't know, but I think that's the story, and then we end up with these two like family units that we can follow up on in our phase 3.
Yeah, and this is I like the idea of leaving this one on a feel good note, and then spend like the next run of movies just fucking ruining it, just tearing it down.
We basically united all of our Dark Legion closer than they ever have been before, which then makes the job of our phase 3 to tear them apart as brutally as possible.
Yeah, you need this hope so that there can be despair.
Exactly. So I think I think that's our movie. I think that's what it's about.
Sweet.
I think that'll do for our brains. We still have a lot of connective plot tissue that we will figure out in the writing of it, but we have the arc. We have not just the characters' arcs, but we do actually have the plot arc this time.
We really do.
The trick is just making it all fit in a pace that makes sense. And making all of the events lead from one into another, which right now that all sounds impossible, but I'm sure we will figure it out.
Yep, we have 3 weeks to do it.
We have to figure it out.
We have to write this. I think we have actually technically given ourselves less time than we had to write the first Dark Legion.
Really? I thought we did that in like 2 weeks.
I believe we had. No, you're right. We did it in 14 days. Yeah. Okay, we have a little bit more time. We have 21 days.
Wow.
For this one. That's right.
How luxurious.
Whee!
Writing a whole block. We have so much more going on in this one, though, I feel like.
I've got great news for you. I've got a really light work week ahead of me.
That's great for you. I did want to say...
Please join our Patreon at patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton.
I think we should... Well, I guess this is an off-air conversation, so maybe I'll cut it. But the phase 3, or the act 3, I think we can split the writing duties where maybe I write the Black Lagoon stuff and you write the surface stuff.
Perfect.
Right? Then we can both write the climax from different sort of levels.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, you all know how this turned out. Hope it's good.
Hope it's good.
Hopefully you're not listening to this episode to figure out like what the fuck went wrong. Why is this like the first terrible installment of this podcast?
God, I hope not.
Hopefully this is like, yeah, I want to see how this particular sausage got made because it's delicious.
And I'm interested to see how much of this makes the final cut and if there's anything that doesn't.
It'd be really funny if it ends up being a completely different script and this is just like a weird commentary.
By the Black Cat.
All right. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. You can follow us if you don't already on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Dark Universe Pod. And you can send us an email at darkuniversepod@gmail.com. There's a phone number where you can leave us a voicemail if you like. It's in the show notes. And
join the Patreon. And also, this wraps up phase 2.
Yeah, the next time you hear from us, it'll be in a conversation we're having about setting up the third phase.
Yeah. I do want to say we are going to take a little break. We will not be back in 2 weeks. There's going to be a little bit of a hiatus between phase 2 and phase 3, just so we can kind of catch up on sleep and recharge ourselves creatively for writing a whole nother slate of movies. We won't be gone for too long, though, so keep an eye on our social feeds to see when we're going to be back. Thank you for listening to phase 2. This has been a super fun phase.
Yeah, wow. We've had so many crazy experiments in this one.
Yeah, we really went off the rails. Phase 3, I'm betting, is going to be even weirder. I have a feeling this podcast is just going to get weirder and weirder as it goes. So please stick with us. We hope you enjoyed our experimental arc that may look tame in comparison once we finish the next one.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And until next time, stay afraid of the dark universe.